Hey everyone, Stefan Burns here. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm pleased to present to you an incredible conversation that took place between myself, Eileen McKusick, author of Tuning the Human Biofield, and Robert Temple, author of A New Science of Heaven, which has become in many ways a new de facto Bible on plasma because he discusses plasma from a physics perspective, also discusses some of the space weather aspects of plasma, but then dives into the covert research around plasma and even the plasma within our bodies and biofields in his book. And so I was visiting Eileen McKusick in Vermont, and we thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to sit down together to talk about plasma and more with Robert Temple. And well, it was very interesting. So we talk about plasma and consciousness. He also talks about some of these plasma entities that have visited him, specifically ORTHAR, which was hanging out around him for 3 days. We talk about breakaway civilizations, the biofield, and much more in this interview. It's a very wide-ranging conversation, perfect to put on while you're doing some other task or chores, because you will learn a tremendous amount in this podcast, and is quite mind-bending, especially once he starts talking about ORTHAR, which is very, very unusual. But you can hear it directly from Robert Temple. Let's get right into the interview. Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. I'm your host, Stefan Burns, joined with my friend, Eileen McKusick.
Hi everybody.
And we had the pleasure today of interviewing and meeting Robert Temple, who wrote the book, A New Science of Heaven. We've both read the book, found it very, very enlightening and fascinating, and we are here to dive into this gentleman's mind. Welcome, Robert.
Hello there, Stefan and Eileen. It's very nice to meet you, and I want to hear all about your work with biofield tuning.
We'll definitely get there. Yeah.
Yeah, and so before we go a little bit into you, let's just check out this video really quick, because there's just a ball lightning phenomena that was captured on camera in Alberta, Canada. It's probably the best video of ball lightning ever. I'm not sure you've seen this, but you're the guy. So let's check this out. It's going to show up right in between us. This is on July 2nd, I believe.
Oh.
And watch once we zoom in, it gets really wild. You can even see like the electric discharge coming off of it, and it's like ultraviolet light almost, it looks like. But that is the ball lightning, and here, gone.
Really? Well, that's pretty weird. And so, in fact, it totally disappears. You can see the complete sky. There's actually nothing there, is there? When it vanishes?
There was a thunderstorm in the area, but it's not like there was active lightning strikes happening right in that zone. Like, at least with what that video captured, that ball lightning seems to be at the edge of maybe the larger thunder system.
I noticed, having seen it the second time, that when it does the vanishing act, sort of pieces are still there.
3. Yeah, 3 pieces.
It's so wild. Where that part where it disappears, so wild.
The 3 pieces, 2 of them look as if they're along an edge. I'm just wondering if this could be a plasma crystal.
A plasma crystal. That is the first time I've heard that phrase. You have to.
You mean like not a Coulomb crystal, but something fractal of that?
Well, plasma exists as gas and liquid and solid and crystal. And in my book, I explained that I believe that ball lightning phenomena are plasma crystals, and that the glowing in the light is within them and along their edges or hinges, and of course, as you probably know, I've also suggested that I think that some ball lightning can be either intelligent or could be what you call plasma drones. In other words, either with sufficient software packed in them to be autonomous, or remotely directed, but more likely to be pre-packaged, pre-instructed with software that would allow a certain amount of leeway in the drone being able to decide its own behavior within limits. And the glowing UFOs are, which are inexplicable in other ways, would be plasma drones. So the question would then be, who is controlling those drones?
Yeah, these sightings seem to becoming more common. And then also just around the same day, I think it was the third, so maybe it was the second. I think it was the third though. They took a photo of a gigantic jet from the International Space Station over Texas. So this is just like a couple days ago. So these plasma phenomenon seem to be becoming, if not more common, at least captured more often by our technology. But my understanding and perspective is that the Earth does seem to be going through this electrification process. And it's being driven by a lot of different factors, the sun being one of them. But if we're seeing more and more of these things and they have this drone-like consciousness perhaps, and you talk about the Kordaluski clouds a lot, then this would suggest, other conscious systems taking a greater interest in what's happening at the mundane level here on Earth. What are your thoughts?
Oh yes, the more we advance in our knowledge and understanding, the more interesting we become, and so you would expect the surveillance to increase, and it might even be part of the instructions that when we reach certain thresholds, that certain phenomena would begin to occur, and that it would be hierarchical, and that as we get closer and closer to understanding what's going on, that the phenomena would become correspondingly more interesting for us. It would start out incredibly basic and dumb, just to attract attention, and then it would be progressively sophisticated. And this brings us to the whole subject of non-human intelligence, putting aside the intelligence shown by plants and animals on our own planet with which we're familiar, some of the more advanced being the dolphins and the whales, for instance. When we're talking about higher levels of intelligence, then we get into other entities, the subject of other entities. And so, what other entities? The SETI programs that we've had so far, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, have all been predicated upon the assumption that the only intelligent life in the universe is going to be in physical bodies, using simple radio waves, and basically a little bit more advanced than we are. There's absolutely no reason to believe that to be true. And in fact, it's an infantile assumption. So we now know, because it's been established that the universe is 99.9% plasma and only 0.1% atomic matter, of which our bodies are constructed and our planet is constructed, that 99.9% of the intelligence in the universe will be inorganic. Will be not, it'll be made of plasma, not be made of atomic matter, won't live on rocky planets, won't turn on radio sets, and will function completely differently. Similar to AI, in fact, in many ways, although it's getting difficult to predict our own AI developments, much less what those of very high AI type entities are already. And if we want to carry out genuine SETI that hopes for any actual results, forget about the rocky planets and the radio waves, and concentrate on understanding inorganic intelligence, which will always be, in some sense, dusty complex plasma, You have to have the dust, or you might as well forget it, because plasma without dust is not interesting, except in the voids which exist within plasma entities, because you can't have a uniform plasma in an intelligent plasma entity. You'll have to have voids which are dust-free, literally voids, which form geometrical lattices. And this work on studying the lattices of voids was done many decades ago by the great unknown genius Victor Goldschmidt, who was a crystallographer. And this kind of work is also being resumed because the first void in dusty complex plasma was actually spotted in 1996. And in 1999, various papers started to appear on this, and it became widely known among the most advanced plasma scientists that void formations in plasma, which were empty areas cleared of dust, were not only there and were not only geometrical lattices, but appeared to be necessary. And so we're talking about dusty complex plasmas self-organizing as intelligent entities through what is often called emergence. And to reach the intelligent state, they would be in self-organized criticality at a critical point. This is something that was worked out in complexity theory. The concept of self-organized criticality was, and this is not in my book, any of this stuff, was originated by a brilliant Danish scientist called Per Bach. Per is his first name, which is quite a common Danish first name, but his surname is a bit unusual. It's just B-A-K, Bach. So Per Bach may not look like much of a name, but he sure was a genius. And unfortunately, he died early, having made huge strides. And he was the person who first articulated the concept of self-organized criticality, which is similar to the far from equilibrium states identified by and written up at great length by the wonderful Ilya Prigogine. Now, I did meet Prigogine, but of course I never met Bach, and he's no relation to the guy who wrote the fugues. Although it may be that the surname is the same, it's just in a German form in one case and a Danish form in the other. I hadn't thought of that until this moment, but that's what makes sense to me. It's the same surname spelt in the conventions of two different languages that are related.
And they were both geniuses.
Well, that's right, yes. And so we could put the two of them together and they'd be Bach to Bach.
The longest punchline.
Yeah.
So question for you is, you've been around for a few years, and what got you interested in plasma? Like I've had my own experience, you've had your own experience of something that just attracts you. You've biofield tuning me with like geophysics and Schumann resonances and all this stuff, really. But what got you just initially interested in plasma, which you then seems devoted your life to understanding? And how have you seen that field evolve? You laid out some of that work with how these voids can form, and even how plasma seems to be forming like cellular structures. I know that Hans Alvin talks about there being a potential cellular structure in interstellar space due to plasma. So if you could just walk us through kind of the evolution, and then also where you think that next understanding may come in based off of your rich background in studying into this.
Well, why don't I just quickly explain about how plasma was discovered. It was first discovered in 1879 by Sir William Crookes, a British scientist who invented the vacuum tube. And those were very important until transistors came along. And he was messing about, which is the fun that scientists sometimes indulge in with their inventions. And he noticed strange things going on inside his vacuum tubes. and he studied it and played with it, and decided that what was going on was that there was a new state of matter being formed within these tubes, which he called radiant matter. And that's what it was called until 1928, when an American scientist called Irving Langmuir decided to change the name to plasma. And it's been called plasma ever since. So what is it? Crookes was most insistent from the very beginning that this is what he called a new stage of matter, or a fourth stage of matter, gas, liquid, and solid being, in his mind at that time, the three known states of matter. But he said this is quite different. And we now know that plasma itself exists in at least four states, that is, gaseous, liquid, solid, and crystalline. Crystalline being another form of solid, I guess you could say. Although the crystalline structure that can take place in the formation of blobs of plasma is extremely important, could be considered a different phase. And it was Winston Bostick later who was playing around with what are known as plasmoids. A plasmoid is a blob of plasma surrounded by a kind of skin, which they call a sheath. And it's double layered in the same way that cell membranes are double layered, although double layered with different things. And these sheaths of plasmoids are very effective because you can have these plasma blobs take on fantastically complex structure within the sheath, and be in all sorts of strange states of extremely hot, extremely cold, and be next to a plasmoid, which is quite opposite. And so you have a hot plasmoid and a cold plasmoid side by side, but the temperature gradient cannot move between the skins of these plasmoids, so they can be next to each other and not affect one another. And so in my book, as you know, having read it, I include a kind of history of plasma physics, how it started, how it evolved, who did what to whom, and when and where, to give at least a skeleton outline of how this strange subject came about, emphasizing the evolutions of the concepts and how the individual geniuses came along and added to the pile. And I knew many of the ones who were still alive at the time I was, so that I could intersect with them. Obviously, I never knew good old Sir William Crookes, although strangely enough, I do have a book from his library, which I bought from a dealer with his book plate in it. So I feel that he's here with me somehow. And clearly, I could never know Langmuir. And although I was alive at the time of Bostick, I was a child, so that didn't work. But I have met a lot of the people who've made fantastically important contributions. One of the most amazing of them was a man, a Hungarian exile called Albert St. Georgi. I was fortunate enough when I was 21 to spend an afternoon with him at Woods Hole, Massachusetts, where he was based at the Oceanographic Research Lab there. It's in my book, I explain the very strange tale of how he happened to end up there. He won the Nobel Prize in 1937 for discovering vitamin C, and he discovered another vitamin, I believe it's called K, and he was obviously a super genius. He was fighting the Nazis through a resistance during the Nazi domination of Hungary. And they wanted to kill him, and everybody wants to kill people like that. And so then he survived, and the communists took over Hungary, and they wanted to kill him. Everybody wants to kill poor old St. Georgie. And so he fled to America in 1947 as an exile, where he received no welcome at all, no post, no job. And he's completely fluent in English, by the way. And he was never given a single grant in his entire lifetime. And I explain in my book the reason for that. Here we have one of the greatest European geniuses coming across in the same way that Einstein and others did. And he was completely ignored, suppressed, given a meaningless job in muscle research at an oceanographic institute, and he had absolutely no connection with fish, just to get him out of the way so that nobody would ever meet him, that nobody would ever know his ideas. And the reason for the suppression of him, this violent suppression of him, was that he had been very, very important in Hungary. He was going to be the president of Hungary, but that didn't happen because the communists suddenly took over, and it became part of the Soviet Union. He knew the true nature and identity of another Hungarian exile who was in America, who was afraid that he would spill the beans. That man was called Ferenc Volgyesi, F-E-R-E-N-C, Ferenc. When he came to America, he was renamed Frank to make him more friendly. He had been Hitler's personal hypnotist. This information is all suppressed. And he hypnotized and carried out hypnosis experiments on more than 60,000, that's 6,000, Jews and Gypsies in the concentration camps. He was working for the SS. Mengele was under him, doing less important stuff. The real evil genius was this man Volgyesi, and the only man outside of the structure that was to keep him secret who knew about him was poor old Albert St. Georgie. So they couldn't just kill St. Georgie, so they stuck him in Woods Hole where nobody would notice him. And he never got a single grant, not a single post, a single honor, or any recognition whatsoever to keep him out of the public eye so he would not expose Volgyesi. Guess what? Volgyesi was one of the many SS people brought to America, not to build rockets like Sturmbannführer von Braun of the SS, or Generalmajor Dornberger of the SS, who formed the space program with their other SS friends. Volgyesi's job was to run the mind control programs of the United States intelligence services. And they included the notorious project MK Ultra and all the others. The only person who could have exposed him, and he kept his mouth shut because he knew better than to get himself bumped off, was Albert St. Georgie. Now, I'm telling you this story because Albert St. Georgie is one of the most important people in forming the ideas which you are both following through in your work on biofields. It was Albert St. Georgie in his initial book, Bioenergetics, of 1966. And in fact, I think it was 63. Then the next one was Bioelectronics. I think that was in 66, or was it 70? This is in the book, these details. And who suggested, didn't just suggest, stated that the human body, and indeed all bodies of all creatures on the planet, contain organic semiconductors, and that the bodies are full of plasma. This was a huge, gigantic step forward by this great genius. Organic semiconductors, who ever heard of such a thing? Now, what is a semiconductor? I know that you both know, but I will say what they are for the sake of your viewers. When you have electric power that you want to use for whatever purpose, you have to do things like adjust the voltage and so on. You know, when you're charging your cell phone, or when you're plugging in some radio, or anything you're doing that involves the use of electricity, you have to control the flow of the current. And in order to do that, you need semiconductors. You see, if it all comes on in full without any reduction or variation, it's too much. It could blow the device, your electronic device. You can't just turn it off, because then there's no current at all. You need something in between that you can control. So a semiconductor allows just what it says, semi-conduction of the electricity at different levels. You have a whole row of semiconductors. You have one that slows it down, one that speeds it up, and then you can do what's called doping the semiconductor with some alien substance, which causes a further variation. And all these circuit boards that you see, which get more and more complicated and more miniaturized, so that we're now down at the nano level, not just the micro level, they all require semiconductors to function. Huge myriads of massive amounts of semiconductors in different configurations and so on. And then you get all these great devices that we now use and take for granted without asking how they work. And semiconductors are fundamental. Well, what Albert St. George showed was that our bodies are full of organic semiconductors. So they don't have to be made of, in the beginning, germanium and silicon, and now all sorts of alloys and other substances. They don't have to be made of metals, just as our bodies don't have to be wired inside with copper. You know, we've got other ways of conducting electricity inside our body. We don't have to insert copper wires. And they're organic things called nerves and other media, such as what the acupuncturists call meridians, with photographs of the energy of which are in my book, because they've been done by now. All these energy circulation systems in our bodies allow electric and protic, in other words, positive and negative currents, to travel around the body. But we have the semiconductors made of parts of ourselves, made of cells, hence organic semiconductors, everywhere in our body. Probably each one of us has hundreds of thousands of them at microscopic level, all over the body, controlling the various currents and energy levels in order to get all of our complex functions to work. And this is Albert St. George. He broke this story to us as if he had come down from heaven and said, now look here, you people, you've got organic semiconductors and you better damn well face up to it now. So that's why you two are doing biofield stuff, because the whole concept of the biofield only started to make sense when Albert St. George showed how biofields would permeate the entire physical body that we use and inhabit, which I call a smart overcoat. When it wears out, well, that's the end of the overcoat, and you revert to your plasma state. So we are all plasma people. The biofield is basically our ultimate self. It's the real self. It's the plasma self. And within the biofield, we have got this thing that's come together, made of atoms, which are balanced charge things that are pretty rare in the universe, to form these organic bodies. So you have a male body, Stefan, or at least I hope you do. And Eileen, I'm pretty sure that you have a female body. And even though you're not an item, which is a great pity, still you can get together spiritually. And the thing is that these bodies that we have are within our larger selves, which actually are bigger than the physical bodies and spread out beyond them. Hence the auras, which certain sensitive people claim to see around heads, for instance. But they form these biofields around the body, the physical body, because that's us. That's the real us. And inside the plasma entity are the same kind of semiconductors that the physical body has, as St. Georgi explained. In other words, we'll probably have more semiconductors inside our plasma cells than we have inside our physical cells. And the universe is simply full of intelligent entities made of plasma, dusty complex plasma, and they would have trillions and trillions and trillions of semiconductors throughout them, with the most amazingly, fantastically complex interior structure. For instance, the interior structure of a plasmoid entity would be more complex than the very basic and simple interior structure of a human physical body, which is nothing compared to the complexity of the interior of a plasma being. So that's enough of me yakking. Why don't you say something?
All right. So here's the torus. And this is what I've observed the biofield to be, a torus shape. When I first started working on bodies with tuning forks, I was just holding the tuning forks right over the body and observing phenomenon, changes in tone and texture and volume that I was encountering. And then I started discovering that there was perceivable phenomena in the atmosphere around the body. And I discovered that there was a membrane, and I could feel this with my tuning forks. So my tuning forks passing through the field, I would encounter a sense of resistance, or the sound would change very distinctly. And then I discovered that there was an actual membrane, and it appeared to be like a bounded bubble. And I spent 4 or 5 years really investigating the whole atmosphere on the body, and I discovered that it had a very distinct physiology and anatomy, just like what you were saying, that there was a complex structure that was invisible to the eye, but that the tuning forks made audible to my ear. And the tuning forks acted almost like an invisible ink decoder that revealed this territory that was hidden in plain sight. And so in this model, the biofield is the mind. Like you said, it's that sense of self, it's that I. And the body, which sits in the center of the torus. So in this model, the body is inside the mind rather than the other way around. And the phenomenon that I discovered as I investigated related to our memories. So in my biofield anatomy hypothesis, our memories are stored in standing waves within our toroidal bubble. And I mapped very specifically where these memories live. So as we generate our electrical experiences, everything we see and smell and touch and taste is an electrical impulse in the body. And that gets recorded in these standing waves, and it moves away from the body. Just like when hair grows and it moves away, the newest hair is closest in. So that's how it works here. The most recently generated memories are close to the body, and then they move away in time. So I find memories that were created in gestation inside the double layer plasma membrane. Just inside that is a person's experience of birth. And then it's sort of like dropping a needle on an album and being able to actually read the vibrational record of someone's life. So I can read someone like a book simply by passing the forks through their field. There's a very distinct language of vibration. Every emotion has a particular frequency signature. Every pathology has a specific frequency signature. And so I can identify things like, oh, you moved when you were 14 and that was incredibly difficult, or your parents got divorced when you were 5, or you had a head injury when you were 18. It's all recorded in the bioplasmic bubble, the record. So this is self, right? And when self dies, when the body dies and the plasma bubble departs, it departs with all of its memories. because all of the memories are stored in there, which I think really explains a lot about how child prodigies and things like that. And a kid picks up a guitar and it seems like it's been played many times before. So at first, when I started to discover the biofield, I thought that the outer boundary was smooth. But then I got insight and realized that it actually was banded and that it has 12 bands. And that these bands appear to me to be comprised of 12 strands, almost like fiber optic strands. So what that leads to is an experience of 144 illuminated plasma strands circulating through the central channel of the biofield. And sometimes people refer to 12-strand DNA or 144-strand DNA. But I do feel like that is related to this fundamental structure, right? And so light can't die, it's energy, it can't be created or destroyed. So this part of us, our illuminated biofield, is an eternal structure, it seems to me, that that we get to put on different human suits in different incarnations, but we are always bringing the same biofield with us.
And to add, just I'm a newbie to this stuff, so I've had 3 biofield tunings. And on the first day I was here, there was another gentleman who was with us, and we had never used tuning forks really like this, but we both had our own way of finding these different structures. I was more auditory. I could hear the note change. I have a good set of ears. And Fabian, he was more like felt it in his hands with the fork vibrating. And then the 2 tunings I had with you the next day, you know, she's like locking right in on certain things, and we're having some pretty nice shifts in consciousness and more. And the other thing I would like to add is, you know, as you know, Hans Alvin has, in a lot of plasma physicists, we just constantly see these filamentary structures across different scales of the universe. I mean, I'm looking at the sun every single day, and we see amazing filamentary structures on the sun. And then Venus has these very crazy filamentary structures in its ionosphere. So it's no surprise that you found a filamentary structure within our own biofield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, everything's fractal, right? So, and plasma appears to behave the same way at different levels of scale.
Well, this is fascinating. I must say, I didn't know about the 12 and the 144. That's amazing. The torus is terribly important, as you've immediately recognized. And a lot of people think that the plasma entities are spherical. And sometimes things can appear to be spherical when they're really toroidal. My friend Arthur Young was, I think, the first person to think about a torus with a vanishingly small hole, which is, so that it becomes almost a sphere, you see, because the hole almost vanishes, but it's still toroidal, which means it still has a double circularity. It still has 2 different radii, even though it appears to be a single sphere. And that's an important fact. And certainly I mentioned that when I was a whippersnapper of 18 years old to Paul Dirac. The only time I ever saw him, I spent an afternoon with him. And he was really intrigued by that, by Arthur's idea of the torus with the vanishingly small hole. He sat down and thought about it and thought about it. And he said he was going to go on thinking about it because he had not thought of that one. Now, all this business of the harmonics has to be true because the only way that things organize sensibly in the universe is harmonically, by resonance and so on. And of course, musicologists know a great deal about harmonics. And it's a great pity that more physicists aren't musicologists, or at least know how to play the piano. And the harmonics which you have discovered seem immensely complex. I mean, I would expect them to be, but for you to have made this level of progress is really quite amazingly impressive. And of course, the layer that you found would be the sheath that we were talking about, and it's a double layer. And so the fact that you were able to detect that means you're a first-class detective, and Simonon will be proud of you. really. You've done amazing exploratory work and made great findings using your intuition and your ability to channel an understanding and comprehension of these things that most people wouldn't, they just or couldn't. And so this is obviously going to lead to further discoveries as you progress. Even though you've been doing it for probably quite a long time, that doesn't mean you're anywhere near finished. And this plotting the interior structures, if you can do that, will be amazingly important. And you seem to have made huge progress at finding the localities within the interior structure where different levels of information are stored. And, you know, for instance, the early stuff is on the outside, and as you get closer in, it's more and more recent. That's fascinating. Obviously, I didn't know any of that. I don't imagine anybody did. But now that you lay it out like that, it makes perfect sense. And of course, the whole thing about frequencies and frequency emissions is fundamental, because each one of us has countless frequencies, just as you've said, relating to different aspects of ourselves or our experiences. But ultimately, each one of us has a perfectly individual compound frequency of identification. As I often say, everybody is a snowflake. And we, I don't mean in the sense of diversity and inclusion or wokeness. I mean, I'm referring to real snowflakes of real snow that, for some strange reason, which nobody's ever managed to explain, every snowflake is different from every other snowflake. I mean, how is that possible? And yet it is. And it's been demonstrated countless times. And so it's true with every individual. And this goes to explain why every single individual is important, because they're all unique. And it doesn't matter if somebody's really boring or somebody is objectionable, or any kind of reasons you might have normally in life to want to look down upon somebody. To go back to Albert Schweitzer, if anybody remembers him, and his reverence for life idea, everything that lives is precious and should be revered. Now, that's not to say they're all good. It's very easy for people and entities to go wrong. And we all know that there are plenty of evil people. How evil is defined is another question that has never been completely solved. It could be that some of the Renaissance thinkers were correct in thinking that it is the absence of good. That seems too passive, really, because evil is more active than that. But the different qualities all have their frequencies, and then we have our compound frequency, as I said, that identifies us. So it's like what they call a QR code or a barcode, you know, that first of all, its first function is to identify us. And oh, that one over there, she's called Eileen. I can read it from her code. And that guy over there, he's called Stefan, and that's in his code. And then you dig down into the code and you get all the codes that are combined into that. So for instance, oh, Stefan had a terrible thing happen to him at the age of whatever. Oh, Eileen had a wonderful thing happen to her at the age of something else. And all this information and detail is there where you dig down and down and down into it. But I'll take this further and tell you why I think that our compound frequency is so important. When we leave our physical bodies behind, which is inevitable because they simply wear out or get crushed or whatever, or drown or something, then we need our compound frequency to identify who we are and to hold what we are. So it identifies not just who we are, but what we are. And since we all revert, this is my opinion, everybody's free to disagree with me, since we all revert to our plasma state, which is our normal state, and we come back and forth into the physical bodies by a process called reincarnation. which I believe everybody has done countless times and will go on doing, unless they become bodhisattvas or something, then the code just automatically directs you to where you're going to go in the other world, the plasma world, which is often called the other world because it's not this one. In religious language, you would say the spiritual world, and you would say that the plasma self is the spirit. But when I discuss these things, I try to avoid religious language because it's got baggage attached, you see. For instance, it's important to try to have dialogue with people who are ferociously determined atheists and who believe that the physical is all there is, and so on and so on. These dunderheads. One has to respect them and realize that they have erred and strayed like lost sheep. But we do need to bring them on board and help them become sufficiently enlightened to realize they've got it all wrong. I'm at the end of a summer cold. So, of course, nobody likes to be proved wrong, but some of us have to undergo this painful experience many a time. So the fact is that we need to bring the atheists on board, and the way to do that is not to scare them off by using religious language. If you start talking about the spirit, they'll run a mile. They'll be gone before you finish the sentence, because it's a kind of automatic reflex they have. They can't face anybody they think is a simpleton or an idiot who believes in anything spiritual, to use the religious term. So if we use a more scientific term for the spirit, speak of our plasma self, and we can explain what a plasma self is, it's not just a figment of some religious enthusiast's fevered imagination, then we can actually have a conversation with these people who don't believe in anything. And some of them might even listen. Even if one person listens, you've made progress. It's worth doing a huge amount of effort to get even one person to listen.
Yeah, I agree. And building that bridge is really important. Like on my broadcast, I talk about a lot of scientific things, but then also I connect the spirit. And I'm not necessarily going out of my way to convince the scientific people that may tune in for that at the beginning of the broadcast that they have to believe the other stuff. I'm hoping maybe it just starts to resonate with them. And that's why I love the topic of plasma, because it is, I think, probably the best bridge. And having a background in geology and geophysics, it does seem to be a very elegant solution to a lot of different phenomena that occur here on this planet. Like there's plasma that's generated during earthquakes. We get these electromagnetic emissions sometimes before, during, and even slightly afterwards. And plasma is one of the best things for generating RF frequencies and other like ELF frequencies and stuff. So and sometimes we see these like emissions more often in land-based earthquakes, where maybe the plasma is not getting absorbed by the ocean. It's just going straight up to the atmosphere. And we see traveling ionospheric disturbances before, during, and right after earthquakes. And it just seems that everything often will that is a more foundational layer. And as you've said and others have realized, or at least a current percentage number of 99.9% is plasma, then it makes sense that if we have a plasma body, that there's actually a lot more plasma hitting here on Earth than we are immediately noticing. But we know that is the case because we have the ionosphere, that's 1% plasma, but that can go up to higher percentages during like a solar storm impact. We have the radiation belts, that's all plasma, and everything out beyond that's plasma for the most part, except neutral atoms. And then we can have like that ball lightning in the lower atmosphere, which is plasma. We see plasma discharges and earthquake lights from literally under the surface, and then down in the
lightning.
lightning, of course, yeah, these gigantic jets, sprites, lightning, super bolts, and then going down to the core. There's, I imagine, a massive amount of plasma down in the geodynamo, and what I also think is at play, the georeactor, and both of them probably working together. So, yeah, it just seems like a very elegant way of linking not only Earth to space, but also to consciousness and spirit. And as a lot of these brilliant scientists that you've shared with us and laid out, they discovered that there's a lot of structure to plasma and these interembedded layers of resonance, which via like general resonance theory is a very compelling theory of consciousness, and that more complex consciousnesses have a more complex QR code, as you said. So it all makes perfect sense to me, but that doesn't mean that we have it fully figured out. But it's like, this seems like a really solid foundation to go forward and to build on. And I'm sure there'll be new revelations over the next, decades and hundreds of years and thousands of years. But this new plasma awareness that we're coming into is really quite exciting. And it's also coinciding exactly with the discovery of electromagnetism and then also nuclear physics. So it seems that humanity was given this push of understanding in that entire realm all at once, and we're still digesting that to a very large degree.
I think there's still so much to explore. I know when I discovered plasma back in 2009, and I started researching it in 2010, it answered so many questions for me, and it really gave me a bridge between science and spirituality when I realized that my biological light, my plasma body, was the same thing as spirit or soul. That in that moment of revelation, that the biological light that powered my biological functioning was a plasma, and that it was connected to all plasma because it's all one light. And really, for me, discovering plasma was this finding the light that I was seeking, and realizing that I was the light that I was seeking. And it was a huge relief to me to actually land on that bridge between science that said everything was separate, it's all solid, liquid, and gas, and that's it, into bringing plasma into the mix and how it just illuminated everything. And that was the end of me reading self-help books, was this just recognition of my own inner light and its fundamental connectivity to all the light that is.
One question I would just have for you is just, do you have any personal experiences with some of this stuff? Like, Eileen has a lot of experience with the biofield, and some people have like out-of-body experiences and things, but I imagine you have at least a couple or maybe a lot of interesting experiences that you could share with us.
Oh, I've had so many thousands of paranormal experiences, almost too much. Yeah, I have.
Would you like to share any?
Well, a lot of them are. There's a lot of things I can't do that you might expect a psychic person to do, because I don't seek to be psychic, except in terms of locating information. I've always been able to locate information, even when I was an undergraduate at university. I attended the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and they have an open library, which at that time had 3 million books. I guess it must be 4 by now. And this, an open library for somebody like me is crucial, because I was able to go into the library without thinking where I was going. I'd go to a certain floor, and I would walk along, and I'd turn down a certain aisle, and I'd either go look to the left or the right, and I would stop at a certain spot, and I'd reach up to a certain shelf, and even without looking, I'd pull the book down, I'd open the book to a certain page, which was the information that I needed when I went into the building, without any conscious planning or thought. So I have this ability to do what I call entering information space, whatever that may mean, and that I can find information by going directly to it, and then I I can find it in its embodied form on a certain page of a certain book, and I know I have to have that book, and it's as if the book, which I don't yet have, is giving out heat and it's seeking me. It may be 100 miles away. It may be because I'm in touch with book dealers all over the world. It could be in South Africa or Australia or something like that, but I still feel the heat of that book, that I have to have that book. And so it's because the information space it penetrates in physical matter completely. It's entirely a plasma phenomenon, and once you have the pass key to get into information space, everything's there, and you have to then know how to use that productively. It's very important to be able to concentrate and focus on exactly what you need, or allow the information space to get its own feel for what it then can see that you need, that you don't yet know that you need, because you need it for whatever you know that you need, but you don't know that it is going to get you there. The information space is actually interactive in that sense. Imagine it as a sort of vast AI storehouse that's just waiting for a few people to come along who know how to get in and help them find stuff. It's a lot. You can imagine information space as a kind of super librarian who wants to help you find what you need. And I can even find stuff that doesn't exist anymore. So, for instance, I can find in archaeology where things are or used to be, this kind of thing, because the information is still preserved, even though the structures are gone. And I can, it's a matter of tuning. It's as if I had my information search tuning fork, like Eileen uses, to go into the information space, the halls of records of the information space, and I get my frequency right, and I can find buried way far away. Oh my God, so far away, deep down in the information space, there's somewhere where the information about some vanished thing that's totally forgotten and totally unknown is still stored. It's all there. The trick then becomes finding it, you see. And I have this knack that I've refined over the decades of my strange existence here. I've refined my techniques to be able to find things quicker and quicker, and I can scan vast amounts of information and spot the stuff. And I've noticed on the occasions when I've sat side by side with other people doing research, and this is over the years, that I process everything at least 10 times faster than they do, and they keep saying, "Wait, I'm or sometimes I'm slower than everybody else because I have to focus in on something that they haven't spotted." But exploring information is my job and my specialty, and so I focus most of my psychic powers, for if they are powers, abilities, or whatever, on my task, which is finding information, and or finding people sometimes, or finding lost books, anything that's to do with information. That's what I am, an information geek, you could say. But I also have other paranormal experiences, but I wouldn't say that they are anything that I cultivate. For instance, I've encountered strange entities. I have never sought them. I don't believe in that kind of thing. I only attempted to summon an entity back into an active state once, and that was a mistake. I'll just say, should I say just a little bit about the afterlife and how this manifests there?
Yeah, just one thing before that, because I am super into the Schumann resonances, and I'm sure you're aware of them. That is an idea for me of, at least it's a construct for how that information space could exist here on Earth and store this information across time. because they're these extremely low frequency waves that are always resonating because they are the default resonance frequencies of the Earth. And so, do you think maybe that's what you're tapping into, or that and something more?
Both, yes, it's that and something more, because certainly a lot of information would be stored out beyond the Earth. And this brings us to the subject of the Kordylewski clouds, which together are 18 times the size of the Earth, the two of them. So each one is 9 times the size of the Earth. And they're at the two Lagrange points. And you know all about that because it's all explained in my book. And they are totally gigantic, intelligent entities, and they're between the Earth and the Moon. So when you talk about reformulating the SETI program, well, I look for little green men 100 light years away on a rocky planet somewhere, when we've got a super intelligent extraterrestrial life between us and the Moon. We've just never tried to contact it. And I'm writing a paper at the moment with my friend Chandra Vikramasinghe, because we jointly wrote the paper that first suggested that the Kordylewski clouds were dusty complex plasma intelligent entities, about the communication, because I believe that they have tried to communicate with us and that we were too stupid to realize it. And so I'm trying to point that out, so that we have to think what to do. But entering into direct communication with these gigantic super entities, who know everything from our point of view. I wouldn't say they know everything about the universe, but they know everything about this planet and everything and everybody on it. The Kordylewski clouds are very small, of course, in the cosmic sense, but they're totally gigantic for us. And entering into direct communication with them means a real step into the unknown, because we don't know their attitudes and their agendas. But people sometimes ask me, do you think they'd be friendly? And I would say, well, at least they're tolerant. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be here. And so they're probably friendly. In other words, they're not against us. I tend to take the view, and this is just an opinion, that human life on planet Earth is a kind of experiment which they're hoping will succeed. Closely monitored from its very inception, and this conversation we're having now is being monitored by the Kordylewski clouds. Of that I have no doubt, because they monitor everything on this planet. They have to. In a sense, they're kind of the guardians, or the viceroys, the double viceroy, to keep an eye on this great experiment of planet Earth. The idea being, if you imagine everybody's made of plasma, and they want to see what it would be like to have life made out of atoms instead of particles, at what we call physical matter, which is atomic matter, on a rocky planet, and beings who have to eat and sleep and are subject to pain and subject to cold and all that, which of course plasma beings are not. They don't eat. They take in energy, but they don't eat food, and they don't excrete food, and they don't have sexual reproduction, so they don't get distracted by those concerns. They can't feel physical pain because they're not physical. They can't feel physical hunger. They can't catch a cold. They can't get physical cancer. There may be such a thing as plasma cancer. Who knows? And they would want to see what can actually be done with life forms in this physical form, where you go through this very complex and tedious process of a plasma being entering into the womb of a woman, inhabiting a fetus which has been forming, which of course reflects upon the whole issue of abortion, at which point lots of hysterical girls are screaming. But let's not get into that. So then the plasma self confines itself artificially to this totally limiting condition of being attached to and basically subjected to a physical body. So you've got to sit for 9 months just growing big enough to pop out. 9 months, even if you're sucking your thumb, that is really super boring. Then when you get out, what happens? Oh my God. So the pain in your lungs when you first take your breath, and then you quickly get over that because that's called air, as you later discover. And then you've got the first 2 years where you're just a nothing. You just babble and gurgle and you say goo goo and gaga, and you don't know who you are, where you are, or what you're doing. You have absolutely no idea what's going on. You're basically drugged by matter because you're just so confused. You're just a nobody and a nothing, except you're very charming to look at, and you learn how to smile back at this huge thing looking down at you with eyes, which you later discover is called your mother. And so you get through that, and then by the age of about 3, you finally get things together sufficiently to be able to kind of be alert and conscious and aware, and you got it together a bit, and you're becoming somebody, and you realize that your name is, say, Bobby, which is what I was called as a child, being Robert, and you say, oh, Bobby, me, Bobby, and you get that, and then you learn language and things, and you eventually walk, and then you've got childhood, and you've got to go to school and pass exams. Oh no, give me a break. And then you go to university, and then you have hormones, and you get all sort of sexy and everything, and then you have relationships, and they bust up, and you have stress, and then you think, oh, but wait a minute, hold on. Wait a minute, now they're going to say I'm grown up and I have to support myself, but I don't. How am I going to get money? I'm going to have to do what? Get something called a job. What's a job? And then you have to pay to eat. You got to get this stuff called food, which in the plasma world you didn't have to do, and you have to actually pay to have somewhere to live. You have to pay to turn the heat on because you get cold. And all these are novel things. So it's not easy to incarnate into physical matter. It's just full of trouble and angst, and it's tedious, and a lot of it's boring, but a lot of it's exciting and novel. And my goodness, the things that can happen and the things you can do. Isn't it fun to have 2 legs and to walk, or even to run? Or yes, what about swimming? And so if you're plasma entities and you're experimenting with this, and you've had humans around for maybe 2 million years who have gradually become Cro-Magnon instead of Neanderthal or whatever, and then they end up looking a bit like us, albeit that we have different shades of skin color, which I look upon as so ridiculously trivial, and yet the whole world's hysterical about that. It's one of the least significant things in the entire world, and yet everybody's screaming about it. I don't even notice, but other people do, and they get all neurotic. And then we have psychological complexes and psychotic illnesses. And my God, I've known so many crazy people. And this is a big adventure. And a lot of people don't make it. A lot of people go to pieces. They just can't face it. You get suicides, and you get nervous breakdowns, you get collapses. Now, all of this is being monitored. We're all part of a big experiment going on. The whole point being that maybe these weird people called people, who are plasma entities who got into this physical form and are walking around on 2 legs, and and shooting basketball and picking their noses, maybe these people can achieve higher levels of consciousness, and in physical form, they can understand and even interact with plasma entities. This is the point we have reached now. This is why now is important. We are just at that level where we can actually, as physically embodied beings, communicate with and comprehend, or begin to comprehend, seriously superior plasma entities, and understand that we are plasma entities. And think of the effect on the planet if enough of a critical mass of people seriously understood that they will never die. Then we're getting someplace. We're just reaching the plateau. Think how many billion years it's taken to get this far. You know, you start with the small creatures, and they evolve. And so here we are. And we're now in the year 2025, which people in the future will laugh and say, they were only in 2025. What did they know? But still, we've got somewhere. And this is the beginning of what could be something big that works, or it could be the beginning of something that doesn't work. In a sense, it's really up to us. I don't even want to think about what it would mean if it doesn't work. We've got to make it work. And of course, what you two are doing is the important component in helping to make it work. Even if you're only dealing with dozens or maybe a few hundred people or even a few thousand people, that could be really crucial, because don't forget, coming to something that I don't approve of, namely the Russian Revolution, it was carried out by a tiny minority of people called Bolsheviks. Who are the Bolsheviks? I mean, they were nobodies, but they took over and they won because the Mensheviks didn't pull it together. The Duma, the first Duma, didn't work. The Bolsheviks were a tiny minority, and they pulled off the Russian Revolution, and they created a gigantic empire called the Soviet Union. I would call it an evil empire. I'm very opposed to what was the Soviet Union, and I wish they wouldn't keep trying to get back to it, because the Russians are, great people if they sort of pull their act together. But I don't want to be political, but I'm trying to point out that a tiny minority of people fulfilled the biblical statement, a little leaven leaveneth the whole loaf, to quote the St. James Elizabethan translation of the Bible in Shakespearean language. It just takes a little tiny piece of yeast to make a loaf of bread rise. You don't have to have the whole loaf made of yeast. So the fact that we're working with small groups of people, small in terms of population of the earth, doesn't matter. We shouldn't be discouraged by the fact that these groups of people are small, because it's always small groups of people that get anything changed. The vast mass and population of the earth is effectively neutral, passive, you could say. And of course, passivity carries with it inertia, which is basically a self-protective automatic reaction to prevent change from being too rapid in case it's dangerous. And we're all annoyed by the inertia of people not wanting to change their ideas, but they're following a natural instinct to preserve what they've got, just in case the change that might be brought about, if they were less inert, might be dangerous for them. And even good changes are dangerous for really lazy people, because it means they have to do a bit of thinking. And there's nothing more painful in life than trying to turn on your brain. Most people are on the off switch, but they've got the brains. We're all walking around with supercomputers in a thing called a skull at the top of our body. It's got visual apparatus, it's got auditory apparatus, it's got olfactory apparatus. it's ready to go, but you have to decide to want to use it. And we are all born without an operating manual. So that's why it's good to learn, and why parenting is so important. And parents need to give a lot more attention to what their children really need. Stop worrying about their feelings being hurt and so on, and giving them prizes for failure and all that, because that just rots their character. You need a certain amount of discipline to encourage concentrated thinking. Can't just let them flop all over the place and do what they like, because otherwise they'll hurt their feelings by telling them, no, Jenny, don't pick up that poisonous toad. But I want to. Oh, okay, Johnny, I love you. Pick it up. Pick up the poisonous toad. I don't want to hurt your feelings. And then, of course, bad things happen. You see, weak, hopeless, flaccid parents are a terrible danger to the world. We need parents with a bit of fiber, a bit of fiber. And you mustn't be afraid to criticize your children. After all, you learn how to avoid burning yourself by touching the stove by being told, don't go near the stove, Johnny. You'll burn yourself. A little bit of guidance goes a long way. We have very little at the moment. Parents have become weak, ineffectual creeps. And this is why we need stronger parenting, but loving and compassionate parenting. We don't want disciplinarian and authoritarian stuff, but what we want is strong, reasonable, sensible parenting, because we have to enable children to be able to cope with things that might hurt their feelings.
Yes, as a parent, I completely agree. And I think we sort of went from one extreme to the other, with extreme discipline leading to extreme laxness. And
Yes.
And now we have to find the middle way. I
That's
really liked what you said about how a loaf of bread only needs a small amount of yeast to rise. And that the work that people like Stefan and I are doing to illuminate people about plasma is definitely adding leavening to the mix, you know,
Yeah.
no matter what size our audiences are.
That's right. Absolutely. And always keep that in your mind, because, and that's why it's worthwhile going to a great deal of trouble to really get through, even to a small number, because that small number, they may be the yeast.
So an interesting question I have for you. You mentioned your ability to pull information and kind of like a bloodhound, find it. And I've talked at length about the Schumann resonances on my channel, so long-term viewers are well aware of my thoughts there for the information network. And I've talked a little bit about these clouds, these Kortolewski clouds, and these sort of plasma structures can emit radio frequencies and conceivably, you know, kind of put information into the Schumann resonances that way. And then we also have all these sightings of plasmoids, like the one we just saw at the beginning of this video. And with World War II, there were the Foo Fighters. So
Yes.
I'm just wondering about what your thoughts are of putting that all together. Perhaps that's all connected with, we have this information network, the Kortolewski clouds, and of course the sun driving most of this, because it's continuously delivering plasma to the Earth magnetosphere system. And probably there's some recycling rate for those clouds, things, dusty plasma coming in, dusty plasma coming out to some degree. But there's so much public interest right now, especially after New Jersey and what kind of, maybe whatever was happening there. But we do have some of these sightings of strange lights, especially as it relates to war and nuclear programs. And your idea of these clouds wanting to oversee what we're doing and to guide us makes sense, that if we did something really stupid with nukes or something, it would all of a sudden maybe just pop some plasmoids down to fool around with us, and it could disable the codes because it's a complex electromagnetic being with far greater intelligence, with what you've been researching into and your ideas. So it could then disable stuff as necessary. So just wanted to get your thoughts on perhaps an alternate, maybe understanding of history. And then even you discuss too, good time to bring it up, is you discuss a lot of these German scientists coming over to the United States. And there is also a lot of people investigating into the idea of like a breakaway civilization that's much more complex technology. And it seems that a lot of this technology into plasma and electromagnetism and even like perhaps anti-gravity has been limited and sequestered, and perhaps it's much more developed now with some outside group. So just what are all your thoughts on that? Because it seems that you have some thoughts there.
Yeah, plenty of thoughts. Let's go back to the first part of what you said first. Information can be active or passive. It's very important to realize that information has no mass and no energy, and its transmission doesn't require any energy. And I take the view that because there's no mass and no energy, its transmission or circulation can exceed the speed of light, the velocity of light, because there's no mass or energy. And it could be instantaneous over vast distances. And that something like the Kordylewski clouds, instead of being 3 minutes away, could be 3 milliseconds away in terms of transmission of information. Information can be active in the sense that it's like more of a signal than just. You mustn't think of information as just being facts which are transmitted. Information can be active in the sense of being a triggering signal. There could be information transmitted which would activate certain physical or plasma switches, for instance. So we need to realize that a lot of the plasma that's coming out of the sun, which, by the way, I believe is a gigantic conscious entity, it's 100,000 times the size of the Earth, and compared to the sun, the Kordylewski clouds are mere minnows. I would call them viceroys of the sun, monitoring what's going on at this planet, which is so interesting with these strange people called people. And so information is key. When you get these gigantic blasts of mass ejections and other blasts coming from the sun, they probably contain structured programming and information and instructions, programs that are meant to be carried out and to affect things, and they would interact with the ionosphere, and they could affect people directly. There's certain to be constant communication that way with the Kordylewski clouds, because I mean the sun 100,000 times the size of the Earth. The Kordylewski clouds combined are only 18 times the size of the Earth. That's tiny weeny. I believe all the stars, which are all made of plasma, as we know, are just a complex plasma, and all of them are conscious. And so the universe is full of consciousness. A lot of it resides in the stars, which are like the nodes, and the filaments that you were referring to earlier are absolutely fundamental. They are the links between the nodes. They are the way that the different stars communicate with one another. And there's a giant cosmic web. Astronomers are now realize that the universe looks like a cosmic web with nodes and filaments. It's because it is made of nodes and filaments. And then the filaments carry current. They're called Birkeland currents. And they carry them at superconductive speeds, that they basically, and they don't require energy for their transmission, and they're essentially a kind of perpetual motion machine of charged current, And we know that they are contra-rotating rings, so that they're spinning in both ways, and that they go along these streams, and then at right angles to themselves, they generate magnetic fields. And there are certain pinch points where these are optimized. I've written quite a lot about that, but there's also a lot more that I didn't write because you can't say everything. And these all go throughout the universe. They are known to be filaments which are 100 million light years across in width. And that's just a filament. When you start getting out into really far space. Another interesting detail to keep in mind is that the supposedly empty space of the solar system, which in 1962 was finally proved to be full of solar wind, as we now all know, which is largely positively charged, but with filaments of negative charge going through it like threads. When you come to the edge of the solar system, which is way out there, way out there, 2 of our satellites have now passed that. There's a sort of huge sheath that surrounds the solar system, being a giant plasmoid. And when they've penetrated that and gone out into what's called interstellar space, they've discovered that the density of interstellar space is double that of interplanetary space. So they've gone from a thinner medium to a thicker medium. And the galaxy appears, therefore, to have a denser interstellar medium than the medium that we have in our own solar system from our sun to our planets, and that's pretty dense enough. So you don't go out into a weaker outer space, you enter a denser space. You could call it the inner space of the galaxy, and of course the galaxy must also be alive, and it's only one galaxy, and there are hundreds of billions of them. So if you're looking for a definition of God, and you're really deeply religious and would like to know who and what is God, the answer is very simple. God is the universe, because we can now explain through plasma science that the universe must be intelligent. And if that's the case, there you've got your God, without even having to get down on your knees and pray for him. And I shouldn't have said him, because this whole business of God being an old man with a white beard sitting in the clouds with a lot of people subconsciously assume is completely infantile. If you're going to talk about God, why not go for the whole thing? The universe has God. Why stick to the God of the earth, you know? God is the universe. I mean, that is the answer. There's your religion. And then you can have whatever ceremonies or prayers or anything you want. But the universe having that much gigantic computing power, even though it's the universe and unbelievably extensive and large, I mean, quite beyond our imaginations to conceive of, it is so powerfully intelligent that it really can know every individual on every planet, every entity in every cloud. The universe is so vast that you still can have a personal God who knows you, even though that God is the entire universe. So this is what you call a reflexive universe. Title of my friend Arthur Young's book, which I helped him to write to a certain extent. And you've got a universe that's interactive. That the universe cares about every intelligent entity within it. And the universe wants everything to work. It doesn't want to destroy things. It's constantly thinking, oh God, not another evil person coming along trying to blow everything up. You know, the universe wants everything to work. So there's your compassionate God, God wants everything to work. I shouldn't say God, I mustn't say he. See what it's like, the temptation to use the word he, must not do that, must not give into this temptation to say that horrible pronoun. No, the God wants everything to work, including your life. God wants everything to work, please, to really work out and be good, be successful. God, i.e., the universe, wants the universe itself to be successful and to work. God does not like all this collapsing and failure and destruction and everything. God does not like that. No, God does not like that one bit. So you see, you can have a personal God, you can pray to your personal God, and that God will hear you, even though that God is the universe. This is what I call a real religion. Let's get started. So I haven't addressed your other points. Okay, so you wanted to know about breakaway civilizations and things. Who knows? Anything's possible. We do know that huge amounts of very advanced tech have been secret for many, many decades, and what has been done with all that tech, that I know for certain a lot of very advanced tech was realized many decades ago. What's been done with that? Okay, we've got some of it working in ways that we can see. We've got nonstick frying pans. Let's face it, this is a civilization-changing development. What's happened to all that tech? Is it the case that the big countries of the world, with their security agencies and so forth, it's the security agencies who lead the governments around by the nose, from what I can make out, because, presidents and prime ministers, who are they? They come and they go. Don't pay any attention to them. If they've got all this, are they just sitting on it, doing nothing with it? I mean, can you believe that? Of course, they wouldn't just sit on it. They must have tried to do some things. Well, what? And what did they do? And where is that? So it's no wonder that people wonder about whether there could be breakaway civilizations. I'm inclined to be skeptical about that, but I would not rule it out. And somebody must have tried doing something with all this advanced tech, which they've had for so long. Where are the results? Well, are they just sitting on all this knowledge and doing nothing with it, or have they done something with it? And if they have, where is it? So let me tell you of a strange paranormal experience I had, which you can build any kind of speculation on that you want. It's got a number of strange features. In my London office, my previous London office, I was sitting talking to a young woman friend about Egyptology, which I'm inclined to do. And we were just sitting there. It was quite late at night. And dark outside and so on. And nobody else working in the building. Everybody gone home. It was after hours. And suddenly, and she saw it as well, this gigantic entity appeared in the room we were sitting in. It was semi-visible. It was a cylinder, vertical cylinder, and it went up through the ceiling. And somehow, strangely, we could see it through the ceiling, even though the ceiling was far from transparent. And this is an old building, actually built in 1685, with a sort of Georgian front put on it. This is in London. And so pretty high ceilings, this building. and tall windows. And there's this spinning cylinder, and it was hazy. And you could see that it was contra-rotating inside. There was one part of it was going this clockwise, and another was going counterclockwise. And the girl and I were somewhat taken aback to have this 30-foot spinning cylinder suddenly enter the room. I think most people would be surprised, but we don't. Both didn't feel scared or anything. And so I thought, I just somehow knew that this was an intelligent entity. And I spoke to it telepathically through my head. I said, "Who are you? What's your name?" And he, because he later made it very clear that he was male, how you can be male and be a spinning cylinder remains to be resolved. But he was most emphatic about that. And he said, "My name is ORTHAR, ORTHAR. You mean your name is ORTHAR?" "Yes, my name is ORTHAR." He had a kind of AI type voice. I mean, he sounded mechanical a bit. He was not emotional, except when you started suggesting it wasn't male, then he got emotional. That's the only thing that really mattered to him. So I said, "ORTHAR, And I instantly knew what that meant. I said to him, "That's initials, that's an acronym, isn't it?" "Yes," because he was quite a brief in his answers, matter-of-fact type sort of chap. I said, "That stands for orbital reconnaissance, terrestrial hugging, automated rover, doesn't it?" "Yes." Now, how I knew that, I don't know, but I immediately knew that. So I thought, well, now, I didn't ask him this question, but subsequently I've wondered about it a lot. I thought, this strange plasma entity, contra-rotating plasma cylinder who's intelligent, can speak, at least telepathically, has a name in English language. Why would that be? ORTHAR stands for 6 English words. Well, that in itself is even more strange than he is, I think. So he explained that it's his job to constantly travel around the earth at street level, as it were. That means terrestrial hugging. He was one of the street level monitors who's constantly monitoring everything that's going on. And he's an automated rover. He was quite proud about the fact that he was an automaton, a highly evolved and intelligent one. Very proud of himself. He didn't feel in any way bad about being an automaton. I mean, didn't feel inferior. He doesn't think there's anything wrong with being an automaton. And most automatons don't. And who's to say there is anything wrong with being an automaton when you really get down to the brass tacks? So he was constantly going around at street level over the whole planet, 24 hours a day, making his reports and observations. And so he hung around for 3 days. He didn't say anything. He would only speak if questioned. I ignored him. Well, what can you do with some cylinders hanging around for 3 days? and you have to get on with things. And I just, I couldn't see him still there. But what I also found mysterious was, why could he afford to waste 3 days sitting in my office when he's supposed to be surveilling the whole planet, right? I mean, that's 3 days out of 365. That's a big chunk of a year if you're an automated rover, isn't it? I mean, how and why on earth would he stay in my office for 3 days and not say anything? And I don't know what he was taking in, but he was taking it in, whatever it was. And of course, the girl I was talking to was just that evening, and she didn't see him again. But I didn't mention the cylinder to my wife. She didn't see him, but she wasn't looking for him. I thought, well, I'm just going to ignore this spinning cylinder, who won't go away. And what the hell's he doing? I don't know. And why does he insist that he's male? What's his problem? And this was before woke, before people got sensitive about their pronouns and wondered what a woman was, and all this kind of stuff had not started yet. And here is this cylinder. He's really sensitive about his gender. What's that mean exactly? It all goes to show that some of these strange plasma entities can be a bit odd and do unpredictable things. And I had another one turn up in my flat, but not a cylinder. And he hung around for 24 hours, wouldn't go away. Didn't say a word. He wanted me to see him, and that was quite a sight. That was a real shockaroo. But it didn't say a word. He was just studying me. And he was there for 24 hours. I mean, don't these guys ever get bored? But I mentioned the cylinder in particular because, and I don't like to be disturbed at my work. To me, this is an annoyance having these entities turn up. Because, won't they please go away and do their own thing somewhere? Because I don't want to be disturbed, because I'm always thinking and researching and writing, and this is a distraction. But the importance about the cylinder is that he had an English name. That's the key. That worries me. How did he have an English name? I mean, English language name. I don't expect it was anything to do with England. But what does that mean? You see, I didn't really want to question him and interrogate him. And that in itself intrigued him, you see, because I'm prepared to just ignore him. What most people would not ignore a 30-foot high cylinder in their office, would they? They get curious, at least. I wasn't. Well, why is that? And how did I know what his initials stood for without even having to ask? I told him what they stood for, and he confirmed it was accurate. Well, what does all of this mean? I don't know what it means. And I don't want to be distracted by these phenomena. It's just like, I'm not a sensationalist, for instance. I hate speed. So the last thing I will want to do is go fast in a car, or fast in a boat, or fast in a plane, or go bungee jumping, or fly in those things that people get into, that they fly around in, or do any of that stuff. I'm not interested in sensations. I'm interested in getting on with my work, my study, my thinking, my books, and doing my tasks that I've set myself. And so I don't wish to be distracted. I'm not a sensation seeker. A lot of people are. I know so many people, they say, I have to go to every country. I have my oldest friend from really infancy, practically, lives in San Francisco. And he has a flat map of the world on his wall in San Francisco. And he puts a pin in every country. And he's only got, I think, about 18 countries left. He's the same age that I am, and I get postcards from him in all kind of strange countries, and I think he said only 18 left. He wants to have visited every country on Earth. He's doing very well. This is what he does. He visits every country on Earth. But I don't. I mean, I'd be interested in the experience, but I don't seek it. You see, because I haven't got time for that sort of thing. So now you know how weird I must be. Could the English name of the spinning cylinder mean that it's from an English-speaking breakaway civilization? That's what we're getting to here. How do I know?
Or they're so intelligent that it just switched its name to English and presented that to you.
That's
Maybe.
certainly true. Well, in fact, another entity that I met when I was at 38,000 feet once was he'd never spoken English before, and it was obvious that she has like a kind of Google Translate thing in her head, telepathic communication, of course, and she was struggling to express all kind of complex issues in English that her automatic translation facility couldn't quite handle, and she came up with some of the most ingenious neologisms. Really brilliant. She created new English words all spontaneously to try to communicate various complex ideas to me. Because it wasn't in the standard dictionary that she has access to, or whatever it is. All automatic translation facilities are going to have their limitations, and she came up against them very fast. Which goes to show that even the highest entities have to struggle sometimes to find the right word in a language with which they're not familiar. Even if they've got all kind of translation aids available to them, there'll still be difficulties. That was quite interesting.
Well, I appreciate you sharing the crazy plasma entity stories. I know a lot of viewers are going to find that really interesting. Do we want to take it back to the biofield? Because you now, with these entity stories, thinking about maybe their plasma structure, then you've been doing 30 years of investigation to biofields. I would just maybe like to get you two pinging off each other a bit more.
Well, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, Robert, was when I first started investigating the biofield and discovering that it felt like I was encountering mass or charge or resistance in it. And you can really feel this. This is something that Stefan felt immediately as he's going through the field. The fork all of a sudden slows down, or it'll stop, and it'll feel like you're hitting something that actually seems to have mass. And I was so perplexed by that and became very concerned about what the composition of the field was. Was I encountering photons or phonons or electrons, or, eventually I started calling it bioplasma. But I came across the term magnetic monopoles at one point, and it really rang a bell in me that there was something related to the biofield and related to magnetic monopoles. And it was very hard for me to find any kind of information about it, about how they might relate or not relate to the composition of the biofield. So I'm just curious what your understanding is of magnetic monopoles and how they may or may not fit in a toroidal biofield model.
Well, they're extremely important, of course, and they appear to have been confirmed at last. But they were first postulated by Paul Dirac, who also was the person to postulate the positron, which was confirmed pretty soon afterwards. And then there have been various scientists working on this, and I give a pretty extensive account of the American one, called Freeman Cope, C-O-P-E, who published several papers on magnetic monopoles, which he believed were in what we call the biofield, that is full of them whizzing about. And this was back in the 1970s and 80s. He was doing this. Now, he was the X-Files master scientist, sort of crazy genius of the American Naval Research group. You see, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force each had their own research groups. The weirdest and most advanced was always the naval one. The Air Force then came next with stuff to do with space and the atmosphere and so on. And lagging behind, panting to try to keep up, is the Army one, although they entered into this as well. I don't know the interior structure and then of DARPA, which was meant to somehow unify them all, but somehow not to unify them all. I don't know. How would I know the details of their internal structure and how independent these separate agencies are now? And we now know that there are 19 security agencies in America which are publicly acknowledged to exist. And then there must be others, or sub-agencies or whatever, other entities of some kind beyond those 19. Whether the Navy and the Air Force are still competing with each other, to who's going to win the basketball game this year, or whether they've all been smoothed out and made into a single blob, who knows? Only people inside the structures themselves would know the answers to that, and I'm sure the politicians don't know. They probably don't even know these agencies exist. They probably, take a typical politician who's told that, for instance, there's an Air Force research agency. Well, he would assume it's to do with how to improve wings or propellers or something simple like aerodynamics. Okay, so they're working on stealth aircraft. Well, they're very interesting because they have charged surfaces, and they incorporate a composite called Bose Einstein concentrate, and all kinds of strange features to the amazing B-2s that carried out such incredible activities in Iran, and just I believe they flew over the White House yesterday, although I didn't see that on television. These stealth aircraft, which are essentially invisible to radar, they use a lot of this high tech, and not necessarily with explaining how, for obvious reasons. But those kind of things. Sorry, where were we just before I got onto that part of it?
Magnetic monopoles in the
Yes,
biofield.
of course, yes, absolutely. The magnetic monopoles were insisted upon by Freeman Cope. He was the person who was banging the drums in favor of organic superconductivity in the human body, which I first discovered him writing about in the 1970s. So I've been on to this for a long time, because I've been around for a while. I'm no longer a 20-something, although it's hard to believe. I don't know how that happened. And so in the 1970s, I discovered Freeman Cope's articles about superconductivity in the human body. I wanted to write a whole book about it. I went to my literary agent at the time, and he practically threw me out of the office. He said, "Nobody would believe any of that stuff you just told me, and don't be ridiculous. I couldn't possibly find a publisher to accept such a book." So that was in the 1970s. I could have written this is how long I've been interested in these things. And Freeman Cope was absolutely certain that magnetic monopoles not only existed, but were fundamental to the human biofield. It specifically said so, and I explained a lot of this in my book, as you would have seen. And it was even suggested that there might be such things as which are called tachyons, Tachyon, in the human biofield as well, which are hypothetical things that may or may not exist. But it seems that the magnetic monopoles have been confirmed, and they are very difficult to confirm, of course, and it would take quite a long time to try and explain the very weird world of magnetic monopoles, which theoretically have a perfectly good justification to exist, but the majority of scientists, I'd say, just as the universe is 99.9% plasma, the scientific community is 99.9%. You must be joking. Magnetic monopoles, don't be ridiculous. So who knows? But it does seem they exist and that they do fill the human biofield. As Freeman Cope said, it would be wrong to underestimate this man, Freeman Cope. I've never found a picture of him. He's completely secret. No details about his life. Was he married? I know that he died prematurely. How? Why? There's no obituary. There's nothing. He was a shadow man because he was the great genius of the Naval Research Laboratory. And as you will know from my book, it's only because of Freeman Cope's work that I was able to solve a mystery that's haunted people for decades about the papers of Wilhelm Reich. His theory of the orgone was connected with his knowing that he said orgone was coming from the sun. Well, he was right, but he didn't have enough information at the time to explain it. His papers were seized by the FBI in Maine when they arrested him. Now, let me explain. Wilhelm Reich was the main disciple of Sigmund Freud in Vienna in the 20s. He used to run Freud's clinic for him. He published a book called The Function of the Orgasm, which shocked everybody because you're not supposed to have orgasms, much less speak of them. And here he was talking about the function of the orgasm and the energy released when there is an orgasm. And he was always banging on about that. But the Nazis didn't like him one bit, and they burnt his books. And of course, he fled to America. Well, so he based himself far away in Maine to be out of the mainstream and beyond the Nazis coming after him. And guess what happened? The FBI came after him, arrested him. They burnt his books in front of him in Maine. Now, this is a man whose books had been burnt by the Nazis. And then they're burnt again by the FBI. What does this tell you? What? The same man's books burnt first by the Nazis and then by the FBI and the home of the brave and the land of the free and so on. The FBI burnt the books of the same man whose books had already been burnt by the Nazis. What does this mean? And so but they seized all his papers, and those disappeared. And all the conspiracy theorists and Reich fans and so on, they've been going on for decades. Where are his papers? The American government's got his papers. What are they doing with them? And all this. Well, I was able to find out what happened to them. The FBI obviously didn't themselves know what to do with all this stuff. They just were seizing things. They had to give them to somebody else to process them. And what they did was they gave them to the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory, the same organization that Freeman Cope worked for. And he was the X-Files troubleshooting guy because he had already been telling the world about superconductivity in the human body, which sounds totally crazy. So they say, well, if anybody can understand this weird, crazy stuff, it's going to be Freeman. So they gave the files to Freeman Cope. That's what happened to Wilhelm Reich's files. And he studied them carefully. And he published several articles about them without saying that he had the files or anything about that part of the story. But there's no way he could have discussed all of this unless he had the seized papers. But he didn't say so. he was always pushing the boundaries of publishing stuff that was just on the edge of being, we can't stand any more of this, Freeman, you've got to stop behaving like this. And who knows how and why he really died so young. It could be suspicious. We don't know anything. Because he was obviously always trying to communicate important scientific information to the public and straining the leash of the contracts that he was under. And this is all done with grant money from the US Navy, you see. He gives at the end of his articles, he often gives the contract number of the grant from the Navy for the research done for the articles. I mean, I'm not making this up. It's there in black and white. And I give the only existing account of what we know of his work that's ever been published, because it was later completely covered up and he was erased from history. And I have resurrected him from being covered up. But so he is the man who ended up with the Wilhelm Reich files, and they're still either at the Naval Research Office, if they still have their own, or at DARPA, which sort of absorbed the naval research, or half absorbed it, or totally absorbed it. Who knows? We don't know any of that. That's where the Wilhelm Reich files still are. Somebody should put in a request for them. After all, why would they be secret? He was supposed to be crazy, wasn't he? His books were burnt, weren't they? I mean, the guy's a nut. Why would you keep his papers secret for decades if he's crazy and the papers are worthless? And you give them to the resident genius at the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory and say, figure this out, and he says there's truth to it all? And the papers are still secret. And he's dead, conveniently dead. Well, follow these threads. I don't live in the United States. I can't go putting in freedom of information requests and things like that. I once put in a request for a single harmless paper of just a few pages by a guy called Adamenko. Adamenko was a Russian who then moved to Greece, and so on and so on. Strange, one of these shadow characters who was studying paranormal things. And I got a reply saying that the paper was declassified, but the only way that I could see it would be to go to that place in Maryland in person, alone, in the room, with the paper, which is, I think, 8 pages long. I could read it. I could not copy it. I could not take any notes. And this is how you consult a declassified document? Well, I mean, I can't get involved in all that stuff. Who has time to play these kind of stupid games? So obviously I never saw that 8-page article, which I'm sure it wasn't that important, because Adamenko was not a deep thinker. He was interesting to a certain extent, but he was a minor character. And I can't imagine that any 8-page article he ever wrote was so important that it has to be guarded to that extent. I mean, it'd probably be some guy with a machine gun at the door. I go in there, I sit down and read it, just in case I take a note. Could get arrested if I jot down anything. No phone, nothing, no paper, no pencil. Sit down and read it and go away and get lost. And if you can remember some of that, well done. We have fulfilled our obligations to allow the public to consult a declassified document. And that's how you do it. That's what you're up against. So I'm not going to be messing with all that nonsense. Anyway, I have plenty of other things to do. But and I was not that interested in Wilhelm Reich. I was not seeking the papers of Wilhelm Reich. I didn't make a search for them. I just discovered it in the way that I discover things, not necessarily looking for them. But they were there in the information space, and I don't think that Freeman Cope is at all glad to be dead. if you take my meaning. And there's stuff going on. And a lot of it's nonsense and bureaucracy. And a lot of it is perverse. And some of it may be worse than that. But what's the use of speculating? Because we can't do anything about any of these things. And I'm not somebody who's living in America to put in freedom of information requests and go through them, fill in the forms, and I just don't have time for that sort of thing. I wish other people would get on with it. I put stuff out there. There's plenty of more things to research and get going on. And what is in the 8-page article by Adamenko, for God's sake, that you have to have a guy with a gun at the door, and it's declassified? Declassified. That means we're supposed to be able to read it. The public has technical access to it in the condition in which I've just described. Is that really truly public access? Of course it's not. They're following the law in a perverted way, because the security agencies don't want anybody to see that. So they've made it just about impossible. I mean, you have to be a fanatic, and you have to live in America. You have to be near Washington and go to this place in Maryland, and they'd probably take weeks to make the appointment, and then they'd cancel it just as you're about to go, and create as many difficulties for you as possible to try to make you give up. Well, I give up without all that, because I'm not going to go into that, because I'm not into going to archives in America to look for secret documents which will only get you killed anyway. If you know too much about these things, you get suicided. You have a car crash. It was an accident, or you have a heart attack. Oh, well, he had no heart trouble. Well, he had a heart attack. Who knows why? These are the two easiest ways to get rid of people, and plenty have disappeared in this way for other reasons, mostly political, of course. And I'm someone who tries to stay out of politics. So, especially American politics, I'm not an American voter, so who cares what I think anyway? But the things are there, but are there people who are prepared to go to a lot of trouble to follow up on any of these leads? I would say that of all the mysteries that really trouble me, I'm more worried about Freeman Cope than anything else. There's something there that really bugs me. He was really onto things. He was obviously a genius. But why is it that we don't know anything about him other than his name? What is this all about, you see? He was the X-file master. He was the only guy that Washington had who could even hope to understand the Wilhelm Reich files. They had to give them to him. Who else? Then he vanishes from the scene, and he was ordered to stop writing about superconductivity in the body. It's all stopped one day. And then when it came alive once more, this is all in my book, an account of superconductivity in the human body was published, from which Freeman Cope's name was eliminated, and all his publications were concealed intentionally. Why? The more you get involved in these kind of things, the more you realize that the whole struggle to create plasma science in the first place, to understand the truth about space and the existence of a solar wind, the truth about plasma entities, the knowledge of the clouds. The clouds were discovered in 1961 by a Polish scientist called Kazimierz Kowalewski. And his great-grandson told me that and this is not in the book, I think. I contacted him after, I believe. The Polish government, which was a communist government then, told him to stop. He was forbidden to continue researching the Kordylewski clouds. They were named after him because he discovered them. He was forced to stop his work in 1961, forced by the government. If he had disobeyed, he would have gone to prison, maybe been executed, who knows. Now, why did the Polish communist government tell him that he was to shut up about the Kordylewski clouds and never look into the matter again? Why? And why was it that they were never acknowledged for decades afterwards? It was only in 2018, I believe it was 2018 or 19, that a team of Hungarian astronomers took an interest in them and verified and proved their existence. And I came across that because I'm on ResearchGate, and they reported that in the ResearchGate, and I sent a message through the ResearchGate messaging service because I didn't know how to reach them otherwise. I said, "Are you congratulations, because this is a Nobel Prize winning thing, in my opinion, to prove the existence of the Kordylewski clouds. But of course, they'll never be recognized. It's not convenient for the establishment." But I congratulated them on their fantastic achievement, and then I said, "Are you studying the plasma aspects of those clouds?" Because to me, it was like it took less than 1 millisecond for me to understand what the clouds really signified. And they replied saying, "No, we are studying the celestial mechanics of the clouds." They didn't know what I meant because they weren't plasma people, you see. They're observational astronomers. They don't know much about plasma. And it had never crossed their mind that these clouds would have to be just a complex plasma clouds. They didn't even think like that. So that's why I contacted my friend Chandra, who's a Sri Lankan retired professor of astrophysics. He was the chief protege of Fred Hoyle, whom I also knew. Wonderful man. Chandra is one of my greatest friends. And I said, "Chandra, we've got to do a paper quickly about these plasma clouds." He hadn't heard of them, but it didn't take him more than a few moments to realize how important this was. So we did that paper, which is reproduced as an appendix to my book. And it was published in a journal called Advances in Astrophysics. And we're doing a follow-up on communication with those clouds. Now, whoever intends to press the button to try to open communication with those clouds is taking a major step in terms of humanity. And I would say it needs to be very carefully considered. But at the very least, we need to be discussing it. And in 1987, I because I was a member of the International Society of Astrophysics.
And just really quickly, I just want to let the viewers know that we'll link that paper in the video description. So if you want to read it yourself, the book that you wrote goes in depth on all this, but that's a shorter paper. And so it's linked on the video description.
Very good idea. Thanks for that, Stefan. Well, in 1987, I was working with the International Federation of Astrophysics. I think that's their name. Because I was active in the space scene then. And I attended their International Congress, which happened to be in 1987 at Brighton. It was a strange event because the biggest storm in British history hit our hotel, which was the eye of the storm that night. The Great Storm of 1987, which destroyed, I think, 20 million trees. And when I went out the next morning, the streets of Brighton were completely covered with pieces of roofs, crunching underfoot. Every inch of every street was covered in tiles and things. Unbelievable storm. What an adventure that was. So I was there at a meeting. There was a side meeting with just a few people present. As a delegate to the convention, I was entitled to be a delegate to attend this side meeting. which was to approve a final draft of an international treaty for what the nations of the earth would do in the event of contact being made with intelligent life elsewhere, which presumably would include contact with the Kordylewski clouds. And we were given copies of the draft, which was fairly short, I think 2 or 3 pages, and we were asked to vote on whether we approved it or not. Now, this is a room with about 30 people present, deciding on the future of the planet. I just happened to be one of these people. It's the only international conference of theirs I ever attended, because I'd been working with them on something. And I read this document, and it called upon all nations of the world to refuse to inform the public. And this is an international treaty that was later signed by all the governments, but before it was put to the governments, it had to be approved by this conference. And there's only about 30 of us in the room, 30 people, including me, voting on an international treaty dealing with the future of planet Earth and the human species. Come on. This is how things get slipped through. So we had an animated discussion. I opposed this treaty because I said I do not believe that the public should be kept ignorant. And it was the treaty called for that to be mandatory, that no government would be permitted to inform the public. They'd be forbidden to. I disapproved of that, and so did a few others. I think there are 6 of us, 5 or 6 of us, who voted against this and strenuously opposed that. The rest voted in favor, and the treaty was approved and passed, and then sent to the governments of the world by this international federation body, because, you know, everything's run by international bodies that are unaccountable. Nobody even knows who they are. And so one can only presume that this treaty was signed and is mandatory and binding upon all the nations of the earth, that the public must be kept in ignorance of any such contact, must be, that it's forbidden to tell the public. The treaty specifically said that. And I was present. I'm telling you that I was sitting in the room when this happened. And I opposed it and was outvoted. I didn't know any of the other people in the room. I don't know who they were. And the ones who agreed with me, I don't know who they were. Because they weren't any of the obvious people. And this was in a small side room. This is a big conference about other stuff. International Conference of Astronautics, you see. And space programs and all that. So big stuff going on, and representatives of all the big manufacturers are there, and this is a big deal. The annual International Astronautical Federation's conference. Everybody goes, and there was a government minister there, this is really important stuff, and yet they slipped this through in a side room with a tiny audience, dealing with the fate of the earth. I just happened to be a witness to this. This is how the affairs of our planet are run. That they mandate that the governments of the world will not keep the public informed. Can you just chew on that for a while and think, what does this mean? And will it apply to the Kordylewski clouds, for instance? So if any of the governments of the world were attempting to communicate with the Kordylewski clouds, they would be forbidden by international treaty to tell anyone but themselves. Also, you can be quite sure they wouldn't be telling their presidents and prime ministers. Who are these international bureaucrats who really run everything? Do we know who they are? probably pass them in the street, and they're nobodies. You wouldn't recognize them. These are not public personalities, and nor do they wish to be. Give some thought to that. I thought I should tell you this. I don't think I've ever mentioned this in public before. 1987 seems to me just the other day, but of course it was a very long time ago to people who are younger. That's 13 and 30. So that's 38 years ago. It doesn't seem like 38 years ago. It seems like 38 days ago. But still, that's what happened in 1987. God knows what happened since then. I dropped out of the whole space scene after Britain detached itself. I was briefly a consultant to the British Aerospace and the Space Division, which they closed down. And Britain stepped out of space and completely. And there was no point in my continuing to be involved because there was no British space anything. There is now, but I don't know anything about it because I gave up on the whole thing. It's a waste of my time.
Well, you're speaking to the right audience now, because my channel is quite large and a lot of us are Americans. And I'd just say to anyone watching this, if you're an enterprising, brave individual, maybe start to file some of these, Freedom of Information Acts. Like to take that upon yourself, and also definitely read Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven, first, so you get a bigger picture. But I love all the amazing detail and little side stories that you've gone into with this, because it's helped to really add some additional color and shape to everything that you've done with your life work. I'm not sure if you have any final questions. My final question just was wanting to maybe draw some connections with water, which we both find very interesting. And so that question would be, I just see a lot of similarities between plasma and water molecules.
Definitely.
And that seems to, it's almost like that could be a complete different mode of consciousness, because they have their own dipole magnetic structure. They form these hydrogen bonds. They form their own crystalline kind of networks at a variety of scales, and the ability to capture light and photons across a whole range of frequencies, going from ELF and like Schumann resonances all the way up, of course, to radio microwave frequencies. That's how a microwave works. It heats them up and does other things. And so if you could just maybe share what you know a little bit about the intersection between plasma and water, I think our audience would find that utterly fascinating, because there's so much. We're talking about all this covert stuff, but there is a huge amount of research being done by the public, it seems, into water, because we all have the ability to research into that, like Dr. Gerald Pollack and some of the friends that you've spoken to, about how like information can get imprinted in the water and the consciousness of it. So love to hear your thoughts there. And
well, water is structured, and it has the you could call them, I've never heard the word, maybe I'm making it up now, wateroids, surrounded by sheaths within water form. And as I explain in my book in some detail, there, at the time that I published the book, it may have grown by now, there were 28 different kinds of ice, all different from one another. And this is very important. I look upon water as the physical analog of plasma. It operates similarly to plasma. And don't forget that we are mostly water. In my book, I discuss the findings of the Russian scientist Pressman, Presman, a truly amazing book that he wrote. And he describes the human body as a vertical water-filled antenna. And he draws an ellipsoid containing the human body inside to give his point. He says we are vertical antennae because the water is a conductor, and the surface of the earth is negatively charged and the sky is positively charged, and electric fields coming down vertically would pass through us, and we are antennas to receive them. magnetic fields are at right angles to electric fields, as you know, and then he goes into that, and the fact that we are physical bodies. In other words, I didn't make clear in what I've said so far that our plasma bodies and physical bodies are not separate. Our plasma bodies permeate every single molecule, not just every cell, but every molecule of our physical body. There are plasma flows across membranes of all cells and mitochondria in the body, and then plasma has been shown to operate in every single molecule of our physical body. So we are thoroughly soaked in and permeated by plasma, but facilitated by the fact that we largely consist of water, which is a conductor of plasma currents. So water and plasma are like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. You know, they're like this. They work together. Water is the physical analog of plasma. And you're absolutely correct. You could go on researching water, and I've had scientist friends who have done that for decades. There was good old Cyril Smith, who has died, unfortunately, and others like Vitellio and Del Giudice has died. These great scientists, these brilliant scientists, have spent decades studying water, and it's an endless source of mystery and investigation and fascination. It's as interesting as plasma is, and anybody who's investigating the mysterious nature of water is really onto something that will go on. You could fill your whole life with that. That's such a big subject. And I'm glad that you're right on top of that, Stefan, because water is key. And there are reasons why water can be filled with information, which explains the homeopathy thing. Because if you put a substance in a solution, and then you keep diluting it to the point where not even one molecule of that substance is left, but the water left behind still retains some kind of imprint of its influence. How is that? If there's not a single molecule there, it's because you don't need the molecule there, because the imprint is in the water, the field of the water. And this explains how homeopathy can work, which seemed, until that was understood, to be physically impossible. And it's quite reasonable to assume that it would be physically impossible if there's not a single molecule there, but you don't need the molecule. That's the key. And water is a recipient of and transmitter of information and form and function. It facilitates information coming from the plasma. So, and water, you're right to focus on water. I only wish that I knew more about it, because my friends who were studying water, I've got a lot of their papers and books and all of that. And you mentioned Pollock, and I simply haven't taken the time or had the energy, because I've had too much to do, to really focus in on water as I should have done. I would have done if I could. I discovered it a bit late, I don't seem to be, but I am actually quite a skeptical type of person. You would never believe that, but it's true. And for a long time, I was hearing stuff about water, and I dismissed it, as a lot of people do, because I thought, well, that's not possible. It was only when I started to learn more and become less of a stupid idiot that I was able to see how the water thing could work. And then I thought, oh, well, that's okay. I now understand that it's possible. So the one good thing about me is that I never hesitate to change an opinion when I'm wrong. I do not let ego get in the way. I do not identify my opinions with myself, you see. And this is what's wrong with most scientists, that they have a theory, they have an idea, and they can't give it up, because they identify their egos with their ideas and their theories. And if they give away, if they say they're wrong about a theory, they think that they're losing a piece of themselves. Never think like that. Every theory is a hypothesis which you hold conditionally. I never hesitate to get rid of any theory or hypothesis. As soon as I realize it's wrong, it's gone, bang, out, gone. I do not hold on to them. It doesn't matter how beautiful they are. You know, I get sick of mathematicians saying, "Oh, my equations are so beautiful," but they may also be meaningless. Don't let the whole beauty thing be a cover for cowardice. Abandon wrong theories. Once they're falsified, they're gone.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I guess maybe I need to do more research into water because I got hopefully a couple days and years left ahead of me. So yeah, we were drinking it right here. Good, clean spring water is key, folks. Make sure you get the best water in you and you just hold good consciousness and, you know, heart-centered emotions and thoughts in your space, in your biofield. You have countless experience with that, of course, and you help people with that.
Well, what you were saying about the interpenetration of plasma and water is absolutely the biofield. We even find concentrations of water in the areas where there is an accumulation of magnetic emotion. So when we talk about feeling blue or under the weather, we really do accumulate sort of low wet pressure systems within our own biofields. So there's an absolute correlation there.
Going.
Now, is there any last things that you'd like to share with us, the audience, or more? Because it's been a fantastically long podcast, which is incredible. So thank you so much for your time already. But is there any final last words of wisdom or just clues maybe that you want to leave people?
I could go on for more hours, but so I don't think that I have any sort of last words in the sense of what about this and what about that, because that would be another discussion. But I would like to say to everybody, don't give up. And no matter how dark things get, and sometimes they do, there's a light, and we have to struggle to reach it. And we want clarity, we want honesty, we want transparency, we want an informed public. So this means free speech. Please note, certain people at certain universities. And I'm not being political. When you talk about free speech, it's an absolute. You have to be able to have free speech. And it's not even a matter of a democratic society. It's a matter of a human existence. You have to be able to have free speech and free thought. You can be as wrong as anything, but we have to tolerate almost any opinion being expressed. There's no use trying to censor things. Okay, it's censor pornography for children. That's different, but you know what I mean. With adult people who are thinking and trying to figure out the universe and so on, not to mention their own lives, you have to have open communication. You can't censor, and you can't be intolerant. You cannot cancel people. And the intolerance that's going on now is outrageous, and it's centered in the universities. I mean, I went to the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and it was full of Jewish students. There was no anti-Semitism of any kind in the years that I was there. Not one incident, nothing. The Christians and the Jews got on fine. Why would there be anti-Semitism? It didn't exist. Now, Penn, which is what it's called, is one of the epicenters of anti-Semitism in the United States. I know, okay, it's not as bad as Columbia and Harvard, but which are a disgrace, truly a disgrace. But my old university, which probably had more Jewish students than Christian students. I mean, everybody was Jewish. My roommate was Jewish. He took me back to his home, and he taught me how to sing Hava Nagila, and I would ask him about what his rabbi said, and because I'm interested in world religions and I want to know everything about everything, just curious and interesting. And everybody got on. There's no problem. There's no anti-Semitism, and everybody agreed that they all hated the Nazis, despite the fact that they were running America's space program, not to mention the mind control program and other such things, but nobody knew that. And there was no problem, there was no anti-Semitism. Now, anti-Semitism is just one example of intolerance where you shout people down, you cancel them, and they become Untermenschen. It was the Nazis who created subhumans, Untermenschen in German. And this is happening now. So you get people on the left saying the people on the right are Untermenschen. The people on the right are saying the people on the left are Untermenschen. You can't do that. We all have to be able to converse. Conversation is now a lost art. Who has conversations anymore? They just scream at each other like wild people. People have gone insane. They don't talk. They don't know how to talk. They only shout. If we expect to have a civilization still existing 50 years from now, we have to stop behaving like that. If you can't talk to people without condemning them and saying they're evil, losing their jobs, losing their salaries, losing their careers because they hold an opinion that somebody in authority or some majority on the campus doesn't approve of, you can't do that. All my life I've had personal friends who have the most wildly divergent political views you could possibly imagine. I've had friends who are so far to the right you wouldn't believe it. I've had friends who are so far to the left you wouldn't believe it. You know, way to the left of Stalin and Trotsky. Good Lord. I have known people with every conceivable kind of weird political view. I've never allowed it to interfere with a personal relationship or friendship unless they become violent or whatever, or something like that. Then you have to dissociate yourself from people if they're causing harm. But if they have these weird views, fine, that's their weird views. I'm not censorious by nature, and I don't think that any of us should be. If we don't have tolerance, we've got nothing. Please, everybody who sees this, if you don't edit this out, I hope not, Stefan, please tolerate everybody else. Tolerate them, even if you suffer, even if you hate it, even if you say, I can't stand this, still tolerate them. Do not cancel people. Do not deplatform people. Do not throw them off the campus. Do not stop Jewish students from entering the classroom on the Columbia campus, which was happening. Do not allow people who are wild with frenzy about Gaza, which after all is thousands of miles away. Let's face it, it's not in the United States, is it? And to interfere with education on American campuses. Okay, you can sympathize with them. You can be wild about Gaza too. You can be as wild about Gaza as you want. You can go to Gaza. You can fight. You can scream. Do anything you want. But don't stop people having divergent opinions from your own. You can't do that. You have to be able to converse and interact and communicate. Oh, we have no civilization left. It's it. It's over. Once people can't communicate with one another, there's no hope for civilization. It's the end. Please don't let civilization end.
Yeah, we're not we're not hoping for that, and that's also something that at least I know I touch on my channel, and obviously we've been talking about a lot, and I think we all share that deeply held belief, and so we're looking for societally that orthogonal ray that breaks this arbitrary polarity of division that's developed in war and more, and that orthogonal polarity, as you just explained, I think really nicely, it's if you can have tolerance and we still maintain a freedom within a new coherent organization of society, and that's not at all not possible, because it really just requires you to have a little bit of tolerance and understanding, and to look at things from other perspectives, and truth is usually in the middle. So yeah, it's something that's deeply true, at least in my heart as well. So thanks for final message. And thank you so much for joining in on this conversation and for sharing so much thoughts and information and wisdom, and for giving us a little bit more of a deeper understanding on the biofield as well.
Yes, thank you so much. I would love to speak again, maybe somewhere down the road while you're still with us, because you have so much wisdom and you've been exposed to so much. So deeply grateful for your time.
Well, I wish you all the luck and grace in the world in the pursuit of your worthy objectives. You're doing a lot of good. Keep it up, which I'm sure you will do. And may God go with you. The universe go with you.
Nice. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.